All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Martine's Musings podcast. I'm your host, MartineFelton. And today I have with me author, speaker, coach, and marriage strategist, Oliver Marcelle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking forward to having this conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to uh, have a conversation with you and share with your audience. I don't take that lightly. Thank you.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Well, I was interested in when we matched up on the group, I was interested in the work that you do with couples, with men, and your book, and just all your good work that you're doing. And I thought that my audience would really benefit from that. Um, I'm not sure how many men listen to my show, but hey, even women can benefit from this stuff as well, right?
Indeed,
Yeah.
I think it's for everyone. I think the principles or components, if you will, of a healthy relationship or of just being good people
Hmm.
are it's transferable across the board. Men, women, the corporate space, everybody can benefit from just being the best version of themselves. I kind of getting tired of using that phrase. I need to come up with another one because
Yeah. Yes.
everybody's using that now. But just to be, a just to show up at your optimal level.
Perfect.
Everybody can benefit from that.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So let give me a little backstory about you, how you came to how you went from one point to where you are right now.
Okay. So backstory. It What I'm doing now. If you had told me 15 years ago, I would be doing this, I would not believe you because I
Same
didn't.
here.
Yeah, I wasn't looking in that direction. I was working in IT, um, and trying to figure out life. So the
Hmm.
the book is very indicative of that journey
Hmm.
that I was on. And my wife and I were. It's probably about 2013 or so. My wife and I were in a marriage class, not the leaders, we're just
Okay.
participants like everybody else. But it felt like many of the other members would kind of gravitate to us for advice. And we're like, listen, fam, we here for the same reason you here.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know what you think you can get from us, but it kept happening. And so at the time, I'm working in IT. So I'm like, you know what? I want to try to learn how to build websites. I didn't want to pay anybody. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to teach myself. So, you know what? A good way to teach myself would be to start a blog.
Right.
That way we could just start putting out, some stuff about our relationship and share that way. And if it resonates with somebody, fine. If it doesn't, fine. But the goal really is that I'm going to be able to learn how to build a website.
Hmm.
And that just from there, it just kind of mushroomed. People started asking us to speak, and then we started doing YouTube stuff and podcasts, and
Wow.
somebody asked us to coach, and it just kind of mushroomed. I just felt like
Yeah.
maybe God has more for us in this
Oh,
whole
for
thing.
sure. Yes.
And so here we are, several years later, doing this. I'm doing it full time at this point. I may do some supplemental stuff here coming into the new year, but doing it full time now. At least I am. My wife is still in the corporate space, and just loving being able to share our journey,
Right.
because it's really not so much about. I was just telling somebody this right a little bit before we started this conversation. It's not so much about me telling you what to think as much as it is uh, encouraging you and motivating you to think, like to go through that process of self
Right.
discovery, to figure out what it is you want, to identify what is the relationship of your dreams. And okay, now that I've identified that, how do I go about getting it? I love getting people to do that. And so
Right.
I'm having fun, man. Coming from not ever seeing this in the card, so to speak,
Mhm.
to doing this and getting some real joy from the interaction that I'm having is really cool.
A lot of people, I feel like a lot of people think going into relationships, we tend to think that we know what type of what is our ideal relationship or our ideal partner. But once you're in it, and you're kind of navigating the relationship, it changes.
Yeah,
It changes.
it
So
does.
what would you tell a couple that is in that particular situation? Like, hey, we got together on the basis of this, that, and the third, and now our lives have evolved into something totally different. How would a couple like deal with that?
Now, the answer kind of depends, and the reason why I'm saying that it depends on whether they are open to change, but just and didn't expect it, but they're not, they're open to it. They just didn't
Right.
expect that this was going to be part of the journey, or they're on the other end of the spectrum where they did not and do not want to navigate change at all. They didn't sign up for what they're seeing
Right.
right now. So that's two very different conversations. If it's the first, um, it's now about making the adjustments that align with the changes that you're seeing. What the mistake that we make often, well, I'm gonna use myself. The
Hmm.
mistake that my wife and I made was that as these changes started to happen, like nobody really prepared us for the fact that, hey, you're gonna go through stages of your marriage just like you go through stages of life. So when
Right.
you have kids, that's going to be a very different stage. You're going to
Hmm.
navigate your relationship differently. When you start to get older, that's going to be another thing. We're grandparents now, whole another thing, right? So
Okay.
not really thinking that, okay, with all of those nuances of life, ergo the nuances of your relationship. And so
Hmm.
now we didn't do is talk about that.
Right.
We made assumptions, we made judgments,
Hmm.
without talking to each other. Those judgments lent themselves to resentment. We don't even know why we resent each other because we didn't talk about it. And now
Right.
you're digging out of a bigger hole. And so, what I tell couples to answer your question is that as you begin to see these things, begin to have conversations about them, explanation, clarify, negotiate if need be, as it
Hmm.
relates to how you want to navigate. As you see these changes, hey, where do we see our relationship going as a result? What do we want to see?
Right.
Because to some degree we can't control everything in life, but we there's some things that we can control. So what do we want to see from our relationship based on the changes that we're in or the stage of life we're in, and really have those conversations. Don't ignore them, don't make assumptions, and don't you know don't don't be closed minded about it.
Yeah. Like that is one of the things that I wanted to really, delve into with you as well, is like overcoming those communication issues, because those things right there is all about communicating, the not talking about it, the resenting and not even knowing why.
Right.
Yes, that can happen.
I've been there.
um yeah, I've been there too. And so overcoming communication issues, how do you do that?
Some of that has to start outside of tense situations.
Hmm.
Because what I notice with a lot of the clients that come to us is that they're trying to tackle that, overcoming these communication issues. They're trying to tackle it in the midst of conflict, or in the midst of misunderstanding, or in the midst of miscommunication. And yes, you can do that, but I liken that to, you know, us getting on forming a basketball team and trying to play the Knicks as our first game.
Right.
Like that's probably not where we should start. You know what I mean? Like we got to play some games. We got to go on the playground, work our way up to Rutgers, work our way up to, what I mean?
Yeah.
And then maybe we can do that. And so I tell couples often there are components of conversation that lend themselves to effective conversation. Uh, Um, and I mentioned them just now. So explanation, clarification, negotiation. Start practicing those things
Okay.
when things are great. Practice them with simple things that you think are frivolous stuff, like what you want for dinner. Like start practicing being communicative, communicating in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sharing in that way and being open in that way and practicing active listening and all of these little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I call them little things, but all of these things that don't have great significance in your relationship.
Right.
That way, when those tense times come, because they will, when those misunderstandings happen, because they will,
Yeah.
now you have practiced, for lack of a better word, a formula that you can just now plug and play into those scenarios. So a lot of couples, we walk them through what that looks like, taking a scenario that they're dealing with and going through those three stages: explanation, clarification, and negotiation. Because a lot of us, we get stuck with explanation. And in that explanation phase is where a lot of arguments happen.
Yes.
Because,
You don't get past the
right,
explanation, and it triggers
there
people,
you go.
and
Yep,
boom.
that's it. And then it explodes.
Yeah.
I react to something you tried to explain to me. I
Mm-hmm.
react to you. I react reckless.
Mm-hmm.
You react to my reaction because you're not going to be reckless with me. I'm trying to tell you something, and
Mm-hmm.
now we're back and forth on reactions, and we have completely, to some degree, laid aside the actual issue because now the we got, like you said, got triggered.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
And what about the couple that doesn't argue, doesn't really argue, but doesn't really communicate either?
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? They'll just let things slide. Oh, the kids are present. People don't like to, well, most people, some people don't like to argue in front of their kids or what have you. What
Hmm.
about that couple that just, the avoidant couple,
Yeah,
I think is the right word, wouldn't you
that's the right
say?
word. Yep. Yeah, there are definitely couples who, for one reason or another, they want to avoid conflict, and that could go way back. That could go way back to family of origin, how they saw conflict dealt with in their families. Maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
swept under the rug, or that peeling back those layers often
Mm-hmm.
is a safe place to start because sometimes they need to understand why they do it in order to understand how to not do it anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
sometimes it starts with kind of digging back to, we'll ask them questions and do some probing questions around how conflict was resolved with their parents or with their grandparents, whoever they grew up with or whoever they were around. And then beginning to practice some level of assertiveness in your communication
Okay.
because sometimes now I'm uh my parents are West Indian, so I'm coming from the Caribbean culture, right?
Me too.
So what's ironic about Caribbean culture is that Caribbean people are very assertive. They tell you what's on their mind. They tell
Mm-hmm.
you how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the very ironic flip side of that is you're taught not to do that.
Yes. They sweep everything under the rug.
Like how you gonna yell at the dude at the store and then tell me I can't say I can't say what I want to say? Like I'm being
Right.
disrespectful, but you just
Yes.
curse out the dude at the store. Like
Right.
that's and so it's that disparity and that confusion that we get, and
Mm-hmm.
then we apply that in some of our, especially in our romantic relationships, because we're not sure how to really navigate that, and so we
And
have
sometimes
couples.
people don't want to rock the boat,
Yep.
or yeah,
Yep.
they don't. They they tend to avoid conflict because they don't want things to be like, I don't know, like they don't want things to be tense.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't want that confrontation. They don't want the feeling, the emotions that
Mm-hmm.
are that we've been taught are aligned with that. And so you actually are going exactly where I was going, because sometimes we have to now work with couples to take that stigma, if you will, off of conflict, because conflict doesn't always mean combative or confrontational.
Right.
Conflict just means you disagree or there are varying opinions that you have to sort through, right? And you can do that. You can be assertive about that without it being tense. You can speak your mind and it can be received in a certain way. So now it's about practice. It's about identifying communication styles. and then identifying how the other person likes to be communicated to. So now if I know what your communication style is, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I know, let's say, for example, I know that you are a hoarder as it relates to your communication style, meaning that there's things that you tend to kind of hold some things in
Right.
until it kind of gets too overwhelming for you, right? You know, remember the show Hoarders, where it's like they got boxes of stuff everywhere,
Yes.
and
Yes.
somebody's
Yes.
got to come in and unpack, right?
Yeah.
So let's say now I've identified that that's the type of person you are, and then by talking and learning you, I know that now you want to be how you want to be communicated to is that you don't want to be confronted, you want to be questioned, you want to be able to control the outcome of the answer. So if
Mm,
I
that
so
makes
now
sense.
I'm coming to you with a question as opposed to, well, you did such and such and such and such. Instead of doing that, which sends us down the road to unproductive conversation,
Yeah.
you like to be communicated with, hey, did you do such and such? Tell me what you thought about that. Now you control the narrative and you are able to communicate better that way. And so once we go through that process of identifying that with couples,
Hmm.
then we just practice doing what we've identified.
Yeah.
And because I believe you should be assertive. Now, what I don't believe is that you should wait until you're frustrated to be assertive, because that comes across as aggression.
Right.
And now we're now
That
we
tends to
now we
happen.
fighting
Yes.
because
Now you're
now
fighting,
right.
and that's a popular um, that's a popular thing. That's what tends to happen. I know for me, I am personally a bit of a hoarder of my emotions.
Hmm.
I try not to be, but I am that type of person that will let things slide and not say anything because I don't want to, rock the boat, or I just don't like, because when if things are tense, because I soak up people's energy, and so kind of don't want the energy to be tense, or I'm soaking it all up.
Mm, okay.
So then I'll just avoid, try to avoid conflict, and then it bubbles up, and when I get really, really pissed, then it just comes out like
It just
crazy.
right like a shot.
Yes,
So you
like
turn
reckless. My mouth is
right.
reckless, and I can't take any of it back.
So you go from hoarder to shotgun depending on the situation. Like after you've
Hmm.
hoarded enough, then it's just
Yes,
so for
I mean I've done that in the
mhm.
past. Try I'm we're all works in
Oh
progress,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
that is
Without a
my
doubt.
typical style. Yes.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? Part of being able to navigate is actually being able to identify and be honest with where you are,
Hmm.
right? Here and listen, some people will challenge me on this, but I'll go out on a limb and say it's not even so much that there are right and wrong, right? So the way you described that to me just now, you kind of described it in a way that gives me the connotation of, man, I kind of don't feel like I should be doing it like that. And that's fine.
Hmm.
That's fine. But listen, I would dare challenge you to say that it's not so much that it's wrong. It's about when should it be used and how should it be used.
Hmm.
Because you are who you are.
Yes.
Like when we're working with couples, you're like, listen, I'm not trying to change you into somebody else. What I'm trying to do is identify what you're working with, and now how does that benefit the team?
Right.
And
Yes.
if there's some little tweaks you got to make, like I was telling the guy the other day, I was like, listen, if you're a point guard on a basketball team, I use a lot of basketball analogies. If you're a point guard on a basketball team and the coach tells you, hey, listen, I was watching how you played this game. Listen, when you are facing left-handed opponents, I want you to pivot a different way. So he's asking him to make an adjustment, right?
Hmm.
So now is the guy no longer a point guard? No.
No.
He's still a point guard. What the
Right.
coach didn't ask him to change his position. The coach asked him to make a tweak and an
Right.
adjustment that would
Right.
allow him to play his position better.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with you. So like knowing that you go from a hoarder to a shotgun, now it's about what are the kinds of things that I need, the stop gaps that I need to put in place that will keep me from going from hoarder to shotgun in such a quick amount of time, that will buffer that. So it could be anything, like ask me some questions, or you ask questions, like
Mm-hmm.
you, if you're picking up on the energy and you're like, you know what, this energy, it's not right for me and it's causing me to kind of like go into a shell,
Yes.
to stay outside of that shell, you may just ask questions that allow the person to further show their energy. And
Mm-hmm.
as they're slowly but surely showing their energy, that gives you time and space to navigate it correctly without having to hoard. Right. So there's different tactics
Yeah.
that you can use that take who you are, but use who you are to be the best of who you are.
What I've been trying to do lately is really stay in the moment and stay
Mhm.
present.
Mhm.
So instead of putting things to the side in that moment, you know, it not I try to say something in the moment, because if I let it go, then I might not say something.
Yep. That's good.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I try, but then at the same time, I need to watch it, how I say what I'm going to say, how I'm going to approach it. So I know that, I have an older daughter, she's 23, and I have then two younger, an 8-year old and a 5-year old. So, my daughter has told me, Mommy, it's not exactly what you say, it's how you say it.
Right.
So, because I'm a very blunt person and I can be sarcastic, and I just say what I mean, and that's it. Like I don't have the tools to sugarcoat things.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just don't. And so then they come out wrong, and people, so that's why I try now to be more conscious in the moment and watch how I say things.
Yeah. And that's a good way to do it. Let me but so what you're doing, right? That's perfect,
Hmm.
because it's the exactly what we have couples go through, right? Is looking at tone, right? Because it's not what you say, because we want you to be assertive in your communication,
Hmm.
right? And for those who are listening who grapple with this, because we did as well,
Hmm.
it's not so much about you. What we tend to do is like, well, I'm not going to say nothing. No, because that causes a whole nother set of problems
Yes,
if you
yes.
don't say anything, right? So it's now it's looking at tone, it's looking at timing, right? So you may have something to say and it should be said, but now might not be the right time.
Right.
Like coming from West Indian background, we all
Hmm.
know, for those of us who want to be honest as Caribbean folk, is that our timing is terrible.
Yes.
And we say stuff like, man, bro, like you couldn't have waited like till we were by ourselves, And so it's sometimes it's about timing, sometimes it's about tone, right? Sometimes it's about actually switching how you say it, the formation of how you say it. So what I mean by that is, I have couples often, I tell them, listen, forego your knee jerk reaction. So if something is said to you and your knee jerk reaction would be to say something reckless back, or to say something loud back, or or whatever it is you do, replace that with an active listening response.
Hmm.
So the active listening response is basically me just reiterating what you said. So if you say something, right, and I do this with my wife often, she'll say something to me and I'll be like, okay, so babe, and I'm, sometimes being comical with her, but this is how I talk. So
Hmm.
I'm like, babe, so listen, before I jump out the window on this one, what I hear you saying is such and such and such and such. Is that what you really saying? So now I didn't say anything reckless.
Hmm.
What I'm really saying is, are you coming for me? Like, do I got to be ready for you? Like, what, you know what I'm saying? But it was nice. It wasn't, but and it gives her an opportunity to now clarify. So it kind of helps move you out of that explanation phase into the clarification phase, and potentially bypassing an argument, because I
Right.
didn't come out reckless. I didn't say nothing, out the box.
Right.
And it gives her an opportunity to be like, no, that's not what I was saying, or maybe it was what she was saying, and then we can move, the conversation from there. But what it does is what you just said you were trying to do. It keeps you in the moment.
Yeah, keeps you in the moment.
Yep. Worries.
Um, so let's talk about your book, Overcoming the Man Laws. What's that about?
Yeah, so that is in a nutshell my journey of self-discovery in several areas that I grappled with. And so
Mhm.
overcoming the man laws for the man who wants to be his best despite what he was taught. So everybody can think of a quote unquote man law, right? Everything from, men don't cry to all the way up the spectrum, right? And it's not that they're all bad, but for me, there were certain things that I didn't realize were detrimental ideologies that I had held on to. I didn't realize that until I actually became a husband
Mhm.
because there were things that were working for me in my single life. So when I became a husband and father, there are certain things that I'm like, okay, man, this either either the situation is bad or I need to make an adjustment. And what I learned was there's some things that I do need to adjust. And there were some areas that I was grappling with: leadership, mental stamina, faith, respect, altruism, authenticity, relationships, trust. And I write a chapter on each one of those.
Okay.
And what I did was break down five of the lessons that I've learned over my time as a husband and father into those eight pillars. And so that's what the
Wow.
book is about. Just my journey of self-discovery in all of those areas.
Yeah, that sounds similar to because I wrote a memoir as well, and but it was about my relationships, my
Okay.
kind of my old relationships that I had with well, who I would consider to be narcissists,
Got you.
um, and how it got me to those relationships were like catalysts for the next level, and until I got married, you know what I
Okay.
mean?
Okay.
Well, this is my second marriage, but so that sounds really interesting. When I know that you do work with men in terms of
Mhm.
coaching.
Yeah.
So how do you implement your knowledge and your experience, and how do you transmute that into your coaching and working with men?
Yeah, so with men, it's kind of similar with working with couples as well, because often what we want to do is make sure that we're addressing the specific goals that
Hmm.
the person has, right? And so often with guys, there's some things that typically with all human beings in general, but with guys especially, there's some deep-seated stuff
Yeah.
that either we wanted to do or we thought we couldn't do or whatever the case may be, right? And so doing some level of digging to kind of get to that really is the first step, that
Hmm.
level of identification or self-discovery, if you will, just kind of bringing that stuff to the surface, good, bad, or indifferent.
Hmm.
It's not a judgment session. It's not a keep this, throw away that kind of thing. There's time for that later on down the road, but
Hmm.
just that bringing things to the surface just to see what's on the table, because often as human beings we spend so much time suppressing for whatever reason. We got to show up a certain way for work, we got to show up a certain way as the CEO, as the
Hmm.
businessman or woman, as the parent. We got to show up all these different ways, and so that lends itself to us suppressing certain things. So often we spend some time, man, just bringing some stuff to the surface. What's some things you always wanted to do? What are some things you're afraid of? What are some things that you wish you could sit down and tell individuals, but you feel like they wouldn't respect you as the CEO anymore, or they wouldn't
Right.
respect you as a pastor anymore, or whatever these things are. And then now going with the things that they picking the things that they grapple with, identifying those things, and then identifying the goals that they have, we can together craft some level of blueprint that allows them to now move forward and navigate those spaces in a particular way that's healthy for them, and sometimes even put them around individuals who are navigating those spaces. Because in the book I talk about this four-step process that I feel like every guy should go through, and then they should take every other guy through it, and it's observation, training, execution, and feedback. And so if you think about it in the sense of employment, right? If you hire me today, there's going to be somebody that you put me with to shadow. Like, hey, this is a person who knows this job. Shadow them for the few days. Then I'm going to get to train. I'm going to do some hands-on stuff, and that person's going to be kind of over my shoulder, making sure that I'm doing it right. Then
Hmm.
there's going to come a point in time where you're like, man, you're good. Here's your office. Go execute. And then there's going to be feedback, whether it be feedback in the way of every project kind of feedback, or whether it be, your mid-year or year end of year evaluation, whatever it is. It's the same way we got to do in terms of bringing folk along in their journey in life or in relationships or with men's empowerment or with women's empowerment. So that's the approach that we often take with couples. It's very uh, it's there's no guesswork at all, because with the couples they take an assessment before they even begin. So the that assessment becomes the baseline for our time together. With
Right,
the men, it's more conversational
right.
and, bringing some things to the surface and then identifying some goals that they have based on what they've uncovered.
Yeah. And usually, are these one-on-one sessions, or are they a group, or?
They are the majority have been one on one. I am very much leaning towards the one to many space. I've only done three things, three events, experiences. So we did one for couples. We did a challenge that was for couples as well. And then I just finished a book study where I took 18 guys through 8-week book study. We went through every chapter of the book. And that was a phenomenal experience. I mean, I loved it because it was just a group of guys doing exactly what I just said, uncovering some stuff. It
Hmm.
was a safe place. Nobody had to worry about, and I had all kind of people there. I had preachers in there, had college students in there, had
Hmm.
all people from all different walks of life, and everybody could talk. The preacher could say whatever he wanted to say, and nobody be like, "Oh, you're supposed to be a man of God." None of that was there, right? And so it was a really, really nice place to really get some stuff off our chest, but then be able to be, guided in a way that will allow us to navigate those things afterward.
Yeah. You said a really key word for me that stood out just now. You said uncover.
Mm.
And I feel like that is really important in all of the personal development that we do, men or women, one on one or in a group setting.
Mhm.
It's like we as humans have just so much to uncover. And because we walk around with so much inner things happening from how we were raised and our experiences, traumatic experiences, and all of that stuff. And then we just hold it like in our hearts or in our guts,
Yep.
and then it manifests into different things. It can even manifest into physical illness. So
Mhm.
it's like really that word when you said it, it was like a light bulb that really stuck out for me. It's just really uncovering and peeling back layers and really showing your being your true self and showing your true self.
Yeah, it's important. And getting in spaces where you can do that, because the unfortunate thing is that we cover up those things and we
Hmm.
suppress those things,
Hmm.
but then we're taught we're not supposed to uncover.
Right.
Because
Yes.
I'm not supposed to look weak to you. You're not supposed to look weak to me.
Hmm.
I'm not supposed to put myself in a position where I might get taken advantage of. I'm not,
Hmm.
there are all of these things that are not terrible things. Like, you should be definitely protecting your heart and
Yeah.
protecting your energy. But at the same time, it's kind of been to our detriment, because now we don't know how to uncover. And like you said, it manifests itself in all other ways. So now we've compounded the problem, because
Hmm.
now maybe I'm physically sick, or
Right.
now maybe I'm dealing with some kind of mental illness, or
Hmm.
grappling with mental stamina in some kind of way. And so now all these other things are just residuals of me not actually being in a space where I can be like, hey, man, you know what?
Yes.
This is how I'm feeling right now. you know,
Mm-hmm.
and having somebody come alongside you that's not going to be like, man, you a punk, man, you need to man up.
Right,
You know what I'm
right.
saying? Like, come on, bro. Like, being able to say, like, oh man, okay, let's knock this thing out. Let's see how we can work it out.
Yeah, I think it's, and I don't want to call it a trend, um, but I feel like our generation. I'm of a particular age. I'm what they would call the Gen X
Hmm. Okay.
generation, and they say that Gen X, we were latchkey kids. We
Hmm.
were left to our own devices. We weren't given tools to navigate life and all
Right.
of that, right? Which
Hmm.
is really true, but I think it's really kind of mean at the same time, on our parents, because they were going. I know my parents. They're Haitian immigrants,
Hmm.
and they were going through their journey too.
That's right.
So it was like they got here, and that was their dream to get to New York, buy a home, live that quote unquote dream for them, because we're basically coming from, an island that, where they didn't have the opportunities that were like here.
Yeah.
So we weren't given the tools,
We
but
weren't.
they weren't given the tools either.
You're right. You're
It's,
right. Because
they couldn't
I
pass
fit
those
into
on.
that. Yeah. I fit into that age group as well. I think Gen X is what, 65 to 80, something like that. 1965 to 1980 if you were born. Um,
Oh, 65. Oh, you mean 65 to 80 the year? Yeah.
yeah, that you were
Yeah, I
born.
think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's nice. So I fit in that category as well. And you're right. You know, they were working really hard.
Hmm.
They were trying to, get a piece of this American dream that, was so widely, you know, pushed out there that you could have it, but it was
Hmm.
really hard to get. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And
Yep.
so as a result, they spent a lot. I remember even growing up, my dad worked, sometimes two and three jobs. So he would, if he was home, he was asleep because he was getting ready for the
Right.
next one. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
and so as a result, now we don't get. But here's the next thing. Here's the flip side of that. The flip side of that is that they were very hard on us.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
didn't get all the tools, but we got all the discipline.
We got all the smoke. Yeah.
Right. 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 And so and there was some good that came out of that, but then there
Hmm.
was some imbalance that also came out of that. And then our generation now, like our kids generation
Yes.
is now, folk are blaming our generation on how our kids generation is now.
Yes. The
Because since
entitled
we
generation.
Right. So since we got all the discipline, we're like, oh well, I'm not about to be, smacking my kids around, and I'm not gonna be hard on them, and I'm gonna be
Yes.
cool, like I'm gonna be their friend, like but,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so it's all of those things that kind of lend themselves to the way we process,
Yeah.
and so now being in a safe place to really unpack that, because it wasn't until I had a son that I even realized that there was some level of imbalance based on how I was raised.
Yes.
It wasn't until I had a son and I was trying to do some of this same stuff and then realized, wait a minute, I do understand now why this isn't working. Like,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can point back to some other things, and we don't always get the opportunity or the space to do that. And I think it's
Right.
really important that we begin to create these spaces, man, so that folk can just have conversation. Because sometimes, again, like going back to the beginning, it's not so much about telling somebody what to think. It's about giving them an opportunity to think. Like,
To
hey, it's valid. Like, let it out.
yeah. Yeah. And how you basically approach
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So
So let
that's
me
our
ask you
goal.
this.
Hmm.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Um, Let me ask you. I always ask my guests, how do men do self care? Do you? What is your version of self care?
So to answer your question, I
Yeah.
think that men are doing it more now
Right.
because it's being talked about more. um, just like I'm seeing more spaces for men, I'm seeing more of the conversation around self care. For me, um, I that was not a priority for me
Mm-hmm.
for a very, very long time. And I, quite honestly, if I'm being 100% transparent, I still don't know that I'm doing it correctly, if there is a correctly, quote unquote, right?
Well, yeah, it's
But
whatever feels good to you.
right, right. And so for me, honestly, for me now, what I'm realizing is that there are certain times where I'm just more centered and more prone to just being calm and relaxed. And so sometimes I'll come down here, like the lights are bright in here and all that kind of stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll come down here and not turn any lights on.
Right.
So I just be because this space is it doubles as a lot of stuff. It's my office, but we do YouTube stuff from here. We do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but it's closed off kind of from the rest of the house, right?
Okay.
So it can kind of double as a man cave. There's a TV and an Xbox in here and that kind of stuff too, right? So this is a good space for me. And then there's something that my wife and I do together that has it's very simple. When you hear what I'm about to say, it's extremely simple, but
What is it?
has great benefits for me. We will get in the car and we will pick a destination. We're going to drive north for 45 minutes and we're going to go one particular route to get wherever we end up going.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to take a different route back.
Oh.
And so sometimes there's no destination. Sometimes there is a destination, like, hey, we're going to try this ice cream shop that's an hour away.
Right.
But sometimes it's just, we're just going to drive. We're going to put on music. We're going to have some great conversation. We're going to laugh and joke and play with each other and all that kind of stuff and just
Mm-hmm.
drive. That has been extremely therapeutic for me.
That is interesting. That is interesting. I could never get in a car and drive for 45 minutes without a destination.
It took some getting used to.
Yes.
It did. It took some getting used to, but then um we started finding places. So we started finding these back roads and
You start
scenic places.
discovering places.
Yeah, great scenery, and I was like, man, this is good. Like I could do
Mm-hmm.
this. Now
Mm-hmm.
gas is dumb right now, but so we got to think twice before we jump in the car.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is a good one as well for us.
That is so awesome. So, where can people find you? Where can they find you and your book before we wrap this up?
Absolutely. The best place is the website, which is Denali, D as in David, EN as in Nancy, OLI.org.
Okay.
And I can give you a link, which I call it the link to all the links. So if you want to learn more about us, want to see what we're doing on YouTube, want to see what we're doing on social media, I can give you one link that you can share with your audience, and that'll take them everywhere.
Okay. And I'll have that link in the description box for everyone who wants to get in touch with Oliver and or get his book or whatever the case may be. All right. This has been a really great conversation, Oliver. Thank you so much for being on the show and dealing with my little video snafu there, helping
No
me figure
worries. No
things out.
worries. No worries. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love having these conversations and getting to share and meet great new hosts. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And to everyone else, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I will be back soon with another episode. Everyone, take care. Bye.